Welcome back inside the Now Morning Show. This morning we are having a conversation about toxic leadership in the workplace. I want to welcome back to the show the Managing Director and Principal Consultant and at Development Consulting Centre Ltd, Mr. Richard Solomon. Good morning to you, sir.
Very good morning to you, Rawkus, and that's a very bright jacket you're wearing.
Well, happy emancipation to you too.
Taking that. And to you, sir, with a mild correction, happy African emancipation.
Thank you very much, sir. All right, so let's get into the conversation this morning. I mean, we've had several conversations around it, but just for the sake of those who may have missed the previous conversations, what exactly is toxic leadership?
Right. So, I mean, the term toxic is very popular in today's culture. You hear people talking about toxic behavior all the time. In terms of leadership, it would be leaders by virtue of their behavior and general attitudes are more destructive to the organization, community, or indeed the nation than they are beneficial.
All right. Tell me about the impact that the leaders, that sort of leadership can have on the organization.
Right. So remember, an organization is really just a collection of people in some type of structure working towards a particular outcome, goal. They're working to produce something, fulfill a mandate, work on a mission. So an organization is what? It's a collection of people. And so if you have behaviors and attitudes at the top that are toxic, then people tend to withdraw. People tend to withhold. People tend to resist. People tend to leave. Depending on the structure of the economy, your better people tend to leave. And this is very dangerous because, you know, humans are not equal. I mean, we like to think that humans are equal, but we have different kinds of gifts and abilities and competencies. So your better people, those with more options, they tend to leave the organization, which of course creates other challenges down the road.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that we love to think that humans are equal, but I remember George Orwell said that some are more equal than others. I wanted to get into a bit of the behavioral patterns that we can consider to be toxic. When you mentioned toxic leadership, what sort of behavior falls into that category? Because some people might think, you know, I don't like what you did, so that makes you toxic.
Yeah, that's really insufficient. Because, of course, in the human experience, there are things that all of us are not going to like about others of us. And that's normal. But we're talking here about leaders who are manipulative, very often appearing friendly. We just worked on a case in the Dutch Antilles where there was a particular leader who ended up in the High Court and all kinds of things over the last 6-7 months. And there was a particular leader who the organization had deemed toxic. The court said they must return to work. Very manipulative, often bullying and threatening. Sometimes veiled threats, sometimes very direct threats. And that was the case in this particular situation. We conducted a psychometric evaluation, gathering data from hundreds of people, and the courts finally decided in the organization's favor that this person really was toxic and should not be in the role that they were in, and indeed in the organization at all, and they were terminated. But it's that kind of thing. You see a lot of bullying, you see threatening, you see manipulation. That is a normal tactic. As a matter of fact, in the case I'm talking about, one of this person's traits is that they appeared very friendly. But when we did the analysis, as they became more friendly, they tended to become more manipulative. So we could only conclude that they were using friendliness as a tactic of manipulation. So it's those kinds of things. They usually do. Let me just add this: they usually have a cadre of people who support them. Because what you find is that if you go their way, then your life is a little bit easier. And there are those amongst us who will say, look, I'm not up for that fight. I'm not up to battle that battle. I'd prefer to just go along and make my life a little bit easier.
Mr. Solomon, boy, I can't tell a lie. I touched some nerves this one and there with that one. Because for me, I feel like we've learned along the way that most, let me not say that, but what I would say is that when we look at people who are in powerful positions of sorts, whether it's any type of leadership, be it in the country, be it in the workplace, and sometimes in the home, people tend to say that, you know, that type of leadership should have a certain force behind it. Or you have the ones that are more friendly, but they still require you to participate and to sometimes motivate you. What's the difference between motivation and manipulation?
Right, so motivation is an internal force. And so if I am being that my motivation, let me say it correctly, my motivation is being catalyzed by the external force of the leader, then I am willing. If I'm being manipulated, then it is not so much that I am willing, but my strings are being pulled either by words or actions from outside of me that cause me to behave in a particular way, or better yet, very often force me to behave in a particular way, often against my judgment.
So that also brings up a lot of questions too, because some people are motivated by bad minds, so they're motivated by proving you wrong, and sometimes leaders would notice that and they would use that to their advantage. So they say, all right, this is what motivates you, so I will play to you. Is that manipulation? Is that motivation?
It is definitely manipulation. You see, what we're trying to do here, Rawkus and viewers, is we want leaders who will reach into the organization and pull out the best of us, reach into the nation and pull out the best of us. And we don't need to play those kinds of games. The challenge that organizations have is finding people who understand and appreciate that there is this balance between focus on outcome and task and focus on care for people. And that's a difficult spot to hit. And so you said it earlier, sometimes when a leader is a bit forceful, some people deem that as toxic. Not necessarily. Just yesterday, I was working with a group of leaders and I was saying to them that all good leaders know when to dictate. As a leader, you don't always need consultation and democracy in order to make a decision. Far from it. Sometimes you need to say, okay, this is how we're going to go, depending on the circumstances. But that's very different to toxicity. This is where a person is bullying to get their way, lying, gaslighting, where they are manipulating others to go in a direction that very often will serve them, serve their agenda, or serve a small subset of the organization.
What can we do to prevent that toxic type of leadership? Or remedy it, as the case may be?
Yeah, this goes to personality. Yeah? This is not a simple matter of behavior. This goes a lot deeper into attitudes. And so the first way to remedy it is to prevent it in the first place. If we are recruiting or we're going to promote someone, you want to check them to make sure it's not just that they have the qualifications and they know the work. That's important, yes. But management is the scientific art of getting work done through people. So your stock in trade as a leader is people. And so you have to make sure that this person that you are bringing on, they have at least the base qualities to be able to lead others. And very often, the way you know that is that they have the base qualities to lead themselves. Self-leadership is the beginning of it. If you can't lead yourself, then how are you expected to lead a group of people? Now, often... Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, in terms of that as well, what about the saying that people, who get power get corrupted and ultimate power corrupts ultimately? So it might be one way before you get that promotion, and when you get into that position of power, for all intents and purposes, you change.
Yeah. So remember I said this goes to personality, and personality goes deep within ourselves. It is our core being. It's not just how we behave, but it's our core being. Ideally, organizations should do some kind of assessment beforehand. Trust me, it saves us a lot of money, time, and stress to do some type of assessment beforehand. We're not looking for perfect people. They don't exist. But if we do that, then we know what we're dealing with. And we can work on that individual. It may be coaching. It may be training. Lots of leaders have coaches today because all of us have some elements that are not in the best interest of all of us. So there's some work to be done, but at least we know what we're dealing with. Now, if someone is already in the position, what do? Well, we start with an assessment again. What are we dealing with here? Is this person manipulative? If so, why are they manipulative? Are they threatening? Are they bullying? Do they give veiled threats? Why do they do so? Do they divide and conquer? That's another thing that you see happening in organizations. We divide to rule. Not the best if you really want the organization to perform at its peak. So let's figure out what do we have. And now, once we understand that, we can begin to say, okay, let's coach, let's train that individual. Or are they even coachable? Not everyone who is in a leadership position needs to be there. You remember using the phrase some time ago, Rawkus, accidental leaders.
Yes.
There have been people in organizations or situations where the question was, and you'll forgive my use of the colloquial, who we go put? Because the position needs someone. I've said to organizations, sometimes it's better to leave that position empty and let's struggle a little bit than put the wrong person. And now we're dealing with years of stress and you're calling in people to help fix things. The horse has already bolted. So we have to be mindful about this. We can't just rush in and put people in just because we have an empty position. Now, this takes us to another place. How are we preparing leaders in the first place, or preparing people for leadership roles? Yeah, it does take us there.
Now, I know that there are different types of leadership styles, right? But is there one that you would say is the best for an organization?
Well, it depends on the organization. Yeah. Ideally, if you're dealing with a for-profit entity, or even if it's a governmental organization, you want a leader that is both well-focused on task and people. So if you do a grid, and you look at it, you want someone who is both highly focused on tasks and highly focused on people. Now, this kind of goes against the base biology of humans. Humans tend to focus one way or the other, either more to tasks or more to people. So it creates this difficulty, but it's something that you can learn. Very often, the people who get promoted into senior positions are very focused on tasks. It is because of their focus on task and ability to handle the technical work that they were spotted, identified, and usually promoted. And usually they're qualified. We don't have a problem of qualified people in Trinidad and Tobago. That's very much available. However, the people side tends to be the struggle. But we can train and coach for that. And I have seen over the years that once it's not a situation where this individual has mental or emotional issues, significant, I should say, because most people have some, mild emotional issues. But once it's not significant where it requires that kind of professional intervention, we can coach that individual. And once they are willing and once they are coachable, then of course they can improve. And I've seen that over my years of practice with organizations. Leaders get better. As a matter of fact, I was just saying yesterday, it's a journey. It's not so much that you hit a spot and now I'm a good leader. It's more of a journey over time.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that it's a journey. How often should we be assessing our leaders to see their competency and if they need to be retrained?
Yeah. Well, good organizations are continuously gathering data about a leader's performance, both in terms of their task performance and their people performance. The assessments usually take place once a year. There was one organization, a Fortune 100 company, we did some work for in the region. They would do an assessment every 2 years, and they would run an assessment center. So this is people come together for 2 or 3 days and run through different types of assessments, including psychometric evaluation, group studies, group work, entry work presentations, etc. And we had a group of assessors who would now assess each one and build a developmental plan. It wasn't so much something is wrong with you. It is, we know this is a journey. We know it takes time. And every 2 years in this case, they would come in and do this large assessment. But most organizations are doing some kind of evaluation of performance once a year. If that is done accurately, then you can use that as your basis for planning, development, and closing performance gaps of the leaders.
So to put it colloquially, it's basically best to take front.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's like anything else, Rawkus. In one of the things I used to do as a hobby was woodwork. I would do woodwork, and I would go buy the wood from the lumber yard. I want to see the grain. Get good material to start with. Anyone who makes anything will tell you. If you have bad material, it's like pulling teeth. It's like walking up a peanut butter hill to get it to be fixed. So it's better to take in front.
Most definitely. I think that's where we'll leave it for today, because that is the key message from what I'm hearing is take front and make sure you start from a good place. The good raw materials equal the best finished product, yeah?
Absolutely, yes. Well said. I can't say it any better, Rawkus. Well done.
I'll take it now on today. Thank you so much for joining us, and all the best. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Same to you, and thanks for having me.
Take care. That's Mr. Richard Solomon, the Managing Director.